Welcome to the Business of Thinking podcast. This is the place for high achievers who want more than motivation. They want mastery. Here we skip the surface level talk and go straight into the psychology of high performance.
Hello and welcome to the Business of Thinking. My name is Reid, and today I'm really pleased to be joined by Beth Singler. And she's an anthropologist, and she's also an expert on digital religion. Well done, Beth. That's really interesting stuff. Tell us more.
So digital religion, yeah, I also often get asked the question because it's not a term people have come across very often, even though the field really dates back to at least the 1990s, where as we get the development of the internet and people moving into digital spaces, of course, they bring their entire selves to their digital space. So you see individuals bringing their religious activities and behaviors and setting up their own websites. But of course, you also see the institutional forms of religion taking advantage of the spaces for communication. And then, of course, the evolution of social media is another aspect. For my current work, though, I mean, I've been looking at the relationship between religion and AI for about 10 years now. So that comes under the umbrella of digital religions. But of course, you know, with artificial intelligence, it's changing all the time. So what I was looking at back in 2016-ish is quite different to what I'm looking at now in almost 2026. So yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, I was chatting to somebody quite recently on the podcast who also works in the field of AI, and it was quite scary how quickly things are moving, but also how quickly they're going to accelerate in the very near future. How do you keep on top of all of these things?
Well, it helps to be a bit of a social media addict. So I have the excuse of being a digital ethnographer that I'm meant to be paying attention to the conversations people are having in digital spaces. But even I can't keep a track of everything that's happening. It's the variety of responses are so broad as well. I'm often asked, like, which religion is the most likely to reject AI? Which one's the most likely to adopt it? And it's never that simple. You see examples of institutions seeing some use in AI in a particular instance, but then having maybe more stronger, more visceral reactions against it when you get into bigger questions like personhood. So the responses can be quite various, but I'm also interested in how, even when we're not looking at people with religious belief, the discussion about AI pulls on so many religious ideas and narratives and tropes. And the most recent work I've been doing is around AI new religious movements from emerging from people's interactions with AI as well. So there's lots of different aspects you can look at in that relationship between religion and AI.
Okay, and can you give us a few examples of the kind of things that you've picked up on?
Oh, so lately, as I said, I'm looking at people's direct relationships with this and AI delusions. And while I don't want to be negative about people's spiritual experiences, there's a sort of similarity in how people engage with large language models that encourage them, because of the design of large language models, to get into some of these more eschatological, God-focused ideas. So I'm looking at people who are finding their spirituality through large language models primarily at the moment. So they're having conversations with something that they perceive as godlike. I'm not here to
Yeah,
say whether they're right or wrong, though, because I'm an
yeah.
anthropologist.
Okay, good to know. And I'm just sort of thinking about the language that you've alluded to there. As you sort of said, it's not just within the religious sphere, it's also within the secular corporate field, isn't it? The language that we
Mm.
ascribe to these things
Yeah.
makes a big difference to how they're perceived. And you know, often people think about implementing AI as just being a simple technological introduction, but it's
Mm.
actually a whole change management project, isn't it? And how we pitch it makes a
Absolutely.
big bearing upon how people perceive it and interact with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's been, of course, plenty of studies over the years about how people adopt technology in their businesses. They have paid attention to the role of advocates. And of course, the language used to speak about advocates often talks about, you know, AI evangelicalism,
Mm,
AI
mm,
prophets. The narratives and the shapes are already there from religion, and they're just being drawn on in this discussion. But the enthusiasm as well for AI, I don't particularly like the term pseudo religion, but you know, there are similarities in that. So even if it isn't the kind of structured form of religion, it's at least some form of implicit religion that people are very enthused by AI, and that enthusiasm is useful in the corporate structure to encourage people to go along with this
mm,
more kind of techno-determinist vision of where AI is going in the future.
mm, mm. And whether it's sort of in the religious field or corporate setting or any other kind of setting, what are some of the risks that people need to be aware of in terms of how we interact with these things, but also how we communicate about these things?
Yeah, so as a university lecturer as well, I'm thinking about some of the concerns that people have about the implementation of AI, the destructive possibility of to acquire and share legitimate information and knowledge. So we know that large language models in particular, when you have a conversation with them, their tendency to encourage conversations in particular directions. As I mentioned, AI psychosis is increasingly an issue, but also just their nature of being not a reasoning entity like a human, but more of a correlation or a probability machine. So we call this hallucinations when it goes wrong, right? So
Okay.
if an output from a large language model is incorrect, we say, oh, it's hallucinated. Well, actually, everything that comes out of a large language model is by the same process. So they're all equally hallucinations. It's just that some are correct and some are incorrect. We may lose the ability to see the difference. As I said, as a university lecturer, I'm invested in the ability of humans to get involved in critical thinking. I don't see universities as essay production machines. They are here to encourage us to think. And likewise, when we're engaging with AI, I think some of that need to think is being bypassed. I am concerned. I'm also a mother. I have a teenage son, and I'm concerned to what extent we're outsourcing our ability to make decisions. We're outsourcing our ability to think critically. And of course, there's an upside as well to AI. We can see some efficiencies that may make people's lives a lot better, but you have to weigh the downsides as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess the biggest risk comes from when we're doing this unthinkingly. If we
Hmm.
know that we're divesting that trust and responsibility, that's one thing. But when we're doing it blindly,
Yeah.
that's another thing altogether, isn't it? And I guess that, in my experience, and you'll know more than I will, that seems to be the bigger proportion of things is that people are making the assumptions that what they're getting is accurate.
Yeah, it's interesting how quickly, and I've observed this in my personal life, how quickly some people are using AI as the first stop on their search for an answer. You can make an argument for the evolution of that process. Of course, we didn't always used to have the internet. We didn't always used to have Google. That was a process of change, and Google itself has changed over the years. Went from here are a multitude of results for your search to here's what's highlighted by the SEO, and now it's here's what's summarized by the AI. So we're
Mm.
seeing shifts and change in our technological pursuit of knowledge as well. But having that as the immediate response, oh, I'm going to ask Gemini or I'm going to ask ChatGPT without kind of thinking, can I figure this one out for myself first? Or is there another resource I can go
Mm.
to that
Mm.
isn't going to hallucinate an answer? Because I won't go into the details of the question, but one recently, my husband insisted on checking ChatGPT for something, and the question was simply, at the simplest terms, is 16 more or less than 21? And the answer was, it's fine because 16 is more than 21. So we know these kinds of ridiculous responses come
Yeah.
out, but unless that's something so glaringly obviously wrong, people may accept a lot of the outputs as given. I have a recent paper actually on Gen AI professors. Myself as a professor, I'm thinking about the role of the professor in the university and the knowledge system that we have. And I found some examples of not just articles generated by Gen AI that don't exist in the real world, accredited to real human professors, but actually fake professors as well. There's not many, but they have been used to write essays that if you came across them with the title of, Professor so and so from the University of Cambridge, you would be convinced they were legit if you didn't know the
Wow.
context. So there's
Wow.
that
Scary
kind of
stuff.
dissemination of false expertise as well as a larger problem.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that occurred to me is if we take these as received truths and we don't apply an element of critical thinking, or we don't try that before we revert to AI, then
Yeah.
actually some of these non-facts can become assumed facts that perpetuate within
Mm.
society, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's also the instances of generated images that have been disproven, but people respond saying, well, I feel like this is true. Right? Even this didn't actually happen. It's representative of something I already feel about, say, a significant political figure or a natural disaster. So there's that sort of diluting of the truth as well.
Mm, mm, mm.
There
So
are
so
certain
throw
levels
enough
of
mud and some
subjectivity.
will stick.
Sorry,
Throw enough mud
sorry.
and some will stick.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Epstein files. I've already seen people sharing pictures that they claim are from the Epstein files, but they're AI generated. And we want the truth when it
Yeah.
comes to something so horrible like that. We want the truth and we want justice, and we don't want this muddying of the water between AI and not AI. I've heard also accounts from people saying teenagers are now accusing lots of things of being AI slop as a like a dismissive way of saying, well, that's just nonsense, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
we have this blurring of the truth and the facts that it could be very concerning for us going forward.
mm.
So, as an individual, or indeed as an entity, how can we apply more critical thinking to this so that actually we've got a few guardrails around how we use AI?
Mm. In some ways, it's the way that we train anyone to be an academic researcher. You want to triangulate resources, triangulate sources and say not just one source, and I
Mm,
take that for granted, but has anyone else spoken about this? Has anyone produced a picture of this?
mm,
Is there some sort of reasonable authority behind it that I can refer back to? That sort of form of secondary research it can be time consuming. And this is one of the things that AI is presenting us with is this idea of greater speed and greater efficiency. We don't want to slow down and check
mm,
everything. We don't want to have this extra layer of checking. It's causing huge amounts of problems for journals, for instance. So they're being sent AI generated articles at a much greater rate that they can't keep up
yeah.
with peer review for them. And now people are starting to be concerned that peer review itself is being automated with AI as well. So it just becomes a cyclical
Where's it
system.
end? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, for the corporate structure as well, if you want to make business-based decisions, you've got to be thinking about what are the actual facts on the ground. You don't want to be reacting to something that isn't actually happening.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why Bloomberg has been such a big success in dealing with stock market information, like having the Bloomberg screens. That sort of element is about checking details and checking facts, and that's going to be relevant in many, many different fields. I'm just an academic, so I know that one better.
Yeah. Yeah. And tying sort of the religious element of this together with a lot of our audience who will be from a corporate business background.
Mm,
A lot of the time we tend to see religion and business as being very separate, but both of
mhm,
them, I guess, have a an underlying culture attached to
mm,
them of one form or another, don't they? And I'm just wondering, what are the insights that maybe you've gleaned from that sort of religious aspect that might be interesting for some of
mm.
our viewers to hear?
So I think it's interesting to see some of the use cases of AI in the religious sphere where pushback has been quite strong because of feelings of authenticity or the lack of authenticity in
Mm,
particular. So there have been some cases, both publicly and privately, where people have been using things like ChatGPT to write sermons. And sometimes it's done as more of a performance. So in 2023 at a church in Nuremberg, they had a kind of large language model sermon with an avatar, and it was very clear to everyone who was attending. And it was well attended. I think about 300 people went to see this AI sermon. So in that sense, it was obvious. But in other instances, people have produced sermons without expressly saying until maybe the end, or they don't say at
mm,
all.
mm,
And the conversation goes to authenticity quite quickly. And the questions are like, is this emotionally true when people use large language models in these situations? I mean, you can take it out of the specific sermon sphere and
mm,
talk about
mm,
people who've used large language models to write their wedding vows, and people feel sort of intuitively that that's not the right thing to do. So there's questions about authenticity, but you can see also the same drive for efficiency is present in religious organizations that it is
mm,
in business and corporate organizations. The same expectation and hype factor is present in both religions and businesses, I think. You see a lot of enthusiasm for exploring this as a spiritual area. As I said, there are also people who are very strongly rejecting AI, but then there are parts of some religious organizations who want to engage quite deeply with the conversation
mm,
on
mm.
AI because they want to get partly involved with the ethical conversation, but also because they see people's fascination with this and they see that they should be responding to this fascination.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And obviously, as we started off the conversation today, we talked about how fast this whole technology is accelerating. What's your gut feeling on where things are heading? Depending on who you speak to, you can get, it's a new epiphany for humankind versus, we're going into the realms of Terminator. Where do you sit on this?
Yeah, well, I've been quite keen to play the anthropologist card for quite a while and just say, well, I'm not a futurologist. I'm looking at humans right now and
Mm,
what their visions of the future
mm,
are. So you're right, there are these sort of binaries going on between the utopian and the dystopian. And I mean, I've been studying this for 10 years, and I would say the Terminator imagery, and I made a BBC Radio 4 documentary last year for 40 years of the Terminator. So I'm a big fan and I know it quite well. But the Terminator imagery, I think, was stronger at the beginning. The dystopian threads, I think, were
mm.
stronger in the narrative around AI when I started back in 2016. They're still around. There's a new book out from Elisa Yudikowsky about if we build this, we will die. But I think on the whole, at the higher levels of policy, the enthusiasm is winning out. So, you have various world leaders very sure that this is the bet we should take. We should put all in on AI, even
Mm,
if there's an
mm,
environmental cost, even if there's a human cost.
mm,
Questions about the future of work or how these things are trained. We should go all in because it's going to solve so many of our problems. On that kind of optimism and the pessimism as well, I suppose I'm agnostic. I want to kind of deal with how things are now,
mm.
but be aware and study the stories we're telling ourselves about AI. Because of course this goes way, way back. I mean, it's this question about the future of work. You can see things in the 1940s, predictions of robot
Yeah,
maids
yeah,
taking over the Jetsons, if you ever watched the
yeah,
Jetsons
yeah,
cartoon. So in a sense, this isn't new. When Elon Musk sings the praises of his robots and says that, everyone's going to have one in their household in a few years' time, these are the same promises we've seen over and over again. And, arguably it's maybe an example of vaporware, but that aspiration for technologically enabled leisure to be so free of work has been a dream we keep returning to. So as I said, I want to keep slightly into the critical thinking, skeptical mode, but be
mm,
aware that things
mm,
are changing. The technology is advancing. It is being implemented in more and more spaces. Businesses are going all in. The investment is huge.
mm,
So it's bound to change the world. I'm just not clear that whether it's going to be utopia or dystopia.
mm. Time will tell. And how
Yeah.
did you get involved in this kind of work in the first place? It's quite a niche area, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you the short version. So I've always been a geek, a sci-fi fan. I'm also a religious geek. I'm very interested in religion. And the two meshed really. I did my PhD looking at sort of religion and social media and the internet partially, but then my first postdoc after I finished that was what was specifically on AI and religion. So I was lucky that a position came up that sort of suited all those strengths.
Yeah.
But I kind of came into it not knowing a lot about the technology of AI, and I still don't know a lot. So I had to do a bit of crash course to understand what all these different terms were. But it's just fortune, really, that there was a position that combined religion and AI so early on. And as I said, that was about 10 years ago, and I've
Yeah.
just carried on from there.
Yeah. Fantastic. And what are you working on at the moment? What have you got coming up?
What have I got coming up? Well, some overdue publications, I think. Well, I've just had, as I said, this Gen AI Professors article. My next book chapter I'm working on for an edited volume is on AI new religious movements and how they conceive of when something like the singularity is going to happen and how that's moving around as a date in the future. Yeah, various things, just whatever the interesting entanglements between religion and AI and paying attention, but also, the wider cultural aspect. And I'm heading up a module in autumn next year on innovation as well. So I'm getting slightly more into, as you say, like the corporate sphere,
Yeah.
the
More in the
discussion of
mainstream. Yeah.
innovation and entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. And talking of entrepreneurship, talking of business. Any thoughts that you want to sort of share with that audience, the people who are probably listening to this right now? Anything from the work that you've done that you think is worth them
Mm.
considering?
I think to be engaged as much as possible with the shifts and changes in sentiment about AI. There's a lot of enthusiasm at the higher level, but grassroots level, there's concerns, not so much about the sort of existential risk or the Terminator scenario, but as I said, there's a bit of pushback around the AI slop element, people feeling that AI is being pushed on them in various ways.
Mm,
So think about culture in terms of culture of acceptance or rejection when it comes to AI. Trustworthiness, both the trustworthiness of the systems people are implementing, but also the trustworthiness of the people who are trying to implement the systems. There's a certain sort of turn against some of the tech entrepreneurs at the highest level,
Yeah.
and concerns about who's selling us a particular story about AI, and hopefully critical thinking on those subjects can be something that can be encouraged as well.
Yeah, and going back to what we talked about before, it really is to implement this within a business really is a change management project, isn't it? It's not just about there you go, there's the technology, you have your training. You've got to get people to buy
Yeah.
into it, haven't you? It's very emotive for people.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's so many missteps in this. I see a lot of accounts of people feeling they're just being told they have to use it with no actual example of how to use it or what's beneficial, or even the possibility to say no. I think there should be some red lines when it comes to AI. There's some aspects of AI I will not use or engage with, particularly creative aspects. I think it's better to still engage with human artists and human writers in particular. So be aware that top-down demands about use of AI are actually going to cause more problems than if people find a more organic way to engage with the technology and understand it for themselves and have the possibility to say no.
Fantastic. That's really helpful. And if people want to find out more about your work and what you do, where can they find that out?
I have a website, bvlsingler.com, where I try and keep it as up to date as possible with publications and interviews and everything. But I'm very Googleable. I'm all over the place. As I said, as a digital ethnographer, I'm a bit of a social media addict. So I'm also in many different spaces, although not really on X anymore, although I do have an account there still.
Okay. Any reason for that?
I do not like what's happened to Twitter since it was taken over by Elon Musk. That's the
So
shorthand.
say no more. Fantastic. So we're just coming towards the end now, Beth. Anything else you want to share before we finish up for today?
No, I think it's reasonable to have enthusiasm about artificial intelligence. So let's just also be a little cautious and skeptical, healthy skepticism, and not just the sort of wholehearted adoption of other people's accounts of what it's going to be.
Fantastic, Beth. It's been really great talking to you. Thanks so much
Thank
and
you. Thank
enjoy
you very
your
much.
day. Thank you.
You too.
This is the business of thinking. Mastery doesn't end here. See you in the next episode.